right, welcome back to the second episode of I Didn't Read Your Book. Today, we are going to be talking about Bringing Home the Rain by Bob Mcgough. Again, if I get the pronunciation wrong, he will get it right himself. So, jumping right to the back of the book, I read a little bit before, but it sounded a little spicy, and I wanted to get my actual real live reaction. So the book is called Bringing Home the Rain: The Redemption of Howard Marsh 1. So I guess there's more to come. Howard Marsh is a lot of things: a liar, a thief, a poor man's wizard. He's the product of a miserable county with more dirt roads than paved, where poverty and loss is the order of the day. He's a man haunted by his past and has yet to find any reason to try to piece himself back together. Where we find him is at the bottom, eking out a living as a water witch, a copper thief, a finder of lost things. I think I know what two of those things are, but I guess we'll find out. Living in a storage shed and trying to maintain what's left of the frayed relationships of the few family members who will still talk to him. Untrained, he uses the drugs. That's where I got. I was like, ooh. He uses the drugs that ravage his body to fuel his magic. Within these pages, Marsh will work to unravel two supernatural mysteries, as only a redneck wizard can, poorly and with much cursing. In Bringing Home the Rain, he has to piece together just why it hasn't rained in months within the bounds of a perfect circle just south of town. Is it a curse gone out of control, or the work of some fell creature? And in Dancing with Your Demons, I'm assuming that's the next one, or maybe previous. In Dancing with Your Demons, he's on the trail of a missing woman whose infamous son once burned down a church. Is there a connection? Are there other forces at work? He is Howard Marsh, the METHgician. He's a travesty, but he's the best hope Jubal County has. So that's the back of the book. Again, Bringing Home the Rain: The Redemption of Howard Marsh 1 by Bob Mcgough. Yeah, like I said, going back to judging the book by its cover. Let's back to judging the book by its cover. I don't know how well we can. There we go. Oh, I'll get better at this. Bringing Home the Rain, and we got a nice little deer antler skull thingy with some flowers, and any mention of drugs is going to catch my attention. I'm really wondering, what exactly is it that, there's a lot here that's got me interested, but I don't really know exactly what the story is going to be. So I think that's actually a good sign of the back of the book done well. I don't really know what I'm getting into, yet I do want to hear about it. So let's go get Bob and let's start. All right, and welcome Bob from Tales by Bob. We just finished reading about the METHgician. What exactly is a METHgician?
The kind of a funny story there. I met a guy that he was very much a drug addict, but that kind of a mysterious, almost magical figure. You just have to meet the guy, and I just always thought, if there really were wizards, it would be this guy. Like,
I've met a couple of those in my day.
Yeah, and now unfortunately, drugs were destroying his life, but that was kind of where the seed of all this was born. Was just imagining, if magic was real, not everyone who had it would be, an upstanding, got it together citizen. So this is kind of trying to shed a light on Southern culture, the kind that doesn't get as much press, and kind of the reality of Southern culture. And
so when you say Southern culture, where are you from?
Oh, I'm from deep South Alabama.
Oh,
It's
the deep south. All
the
right.
deep south. I'm from a town with no stoplight, no anything. There's a
Okay.
mom and pop gas station, and that's about it.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So that's interesting. So yeah, I guess, the first thing that jumps out to me about, this story with, there's something weird going on and then there's drugs involved and we're in this small town. So immediately whenever, small town gets mentioned in the context of the story or anything, what pops into my head is the level of, what's the word? I don't know, just how in each other's business everybody is. So that it, and having had a past that may not have been exactly like our METHgician here, but dabble with the dark arts a little bit. It's just how I can't imagine having this type of small town environment and also getting into these devious things, and you must have to live by that and own it.
Yeah, he very much does. Now in this setting, magic isn't just open. It's not like everyone goes around knowing that magic exists. Think of it kind of Harry Potter-esque. There is magic. Maybe sometimes people see magic, but it's not common. He's more known as just like a petty thief. He's the town screw up. So everyone knows who he is, but not because he's a wizard. It's because he's a drug addict that probably stole the copper out of their air conditioning unit at some time. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you had mentioned there's a couple things here. Maybe there are southernisms that I didn't know. You said a water witch. What the hell is a water witch?
Okay, so I've actually seen this. This is a real thing. Now there's going to be science behind it, but as a young child, I had no idea. But water witching is dowsing is another word for it. But it's some people use it to find like where to put a well.
Okay.
But I've seen it done. My many years ago, my dad had run a water line out to an outbuilding and wasn't sure where he had placed it. Like, that was like 10 years ago, wasn't exactly sure where it was, and he needed to do some digging. So it just so happened that a cousin of mine pulled up around the same time that we were kind of hashing this out. And he was like, oh, great. He's a water witch. And and you got to understand, my dad was a petroleum engineer, heavily based in science. But we went and got a couple of welding rods, and my cousin you bend them into an L, and you hold them loosely in your hand. And when you would cross water, the welding rods would cross.
Oh, I've seen those before.
Yeah, so that's water witching, and it's one of the few. So I've been told that really what's happening there is digging kind of interferes with the magnetic crust of the earth, and so that's what causes the metal rods to cross. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but it's very much viewed as a legitimate thing in parts of the South, and so that's one legitimate way that he earns money is people know that he's a water witch and will hire him to find water lines or where to dig a well.
Oh wow, yeah. See, I've seen the things before, but I never heard of that before.
Yeah.
So then, talking about magic, at first, we're just being told about Marsh and how he's not doing so well. And then you bring up this circle. It's just south of town. What's going on with the circle?
Yeah, without going into spoilers, he is basically he's unaware of it, but it gets brought to his attention that there is just south of town, there's a perfect 10-mile circle where it hasn't rained in months. And if you watch, apparently you can watch on the weather report, like the Doppler radar, the clouds just part around it when storms are passing by. And he gets more or less strong-armed into handling this. Marsh, he has magical abilities, but he's never been trained, and so he really doesn't like to use them. He's also very lazy, and he is a drug addict. If it's not going to help him chase down his his next stash, he's just not all that interested. So he gets roped into investigating A, what's causing this, and then B, he's tasked with stopping whatever it's causing this, because it's fairly obvious that something is happening, and this kind of nebulous government entity wants it taken care of. But it's, at the end of the day, it's a trivial matter. It's just some rain's not falling. It's not like the world is
People are
ending.
dying. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it was something important, they would send somebody important, but it's not. So
Well, that was where my mind was heading, is that if there's this, this thing that, is an anomaly, and there's all this, then I would expect some type of NASA or some, the EPA or something to be on there. How does a low life like Marsh get involved?
Yeah. So it's not really gone into, because it's not really necessarily the driving force of the series. But because this is the first book in the series, I have the next two written. And so this is just the first one to come out. But this alphabet agency doesn't come into play in every story. Like, they're just kind of a sporadic, like, hey, Jubal County is a real backwater. He's kind of the known magical entity there. That's popped up on their radar. So if something happens, they tag him in, or force him in, and that's just kind of how it works. But like I said, I mean, this area is very much like, Jubal County isn't a real county in Alabama. It's one I made up for it, but it's fairly heavily based on the county I grew up in, which I think the population of the county is just over 11,000, and that's for the entire county. Wow. Which is it has more dirt roads than any other county in the state. It's very, very rural, lots of farms, lots of forests, and lots of poverty. And so most of the stuff he gets wrangled into is not stuff that pops up on government radar. It's for example, in the second story, Dancing with Your Demons, we were talking about water witching. He gets hired to do some water witching, and realizes that, or it gets brought to his attention that a woman he knows kind of runs in the same circles as him, also a drug addict, has not been seen for about a week, which is unusual because she has children, and it's unusual. Like, she's not, she has left her kids alone for some days at a time, but to be gone for a whole week without any sort of contact, that's not normal. And so he kind of gets roped into trying to find her. So that was not something that was on anybody's radar. People don't care about drug addicts, like, that's just the reality. Is the people in her life have all written her off. So Marsh kind of is like, at the end of the day, these are Marsh's people. So he kind of feels obligated to kind of, even though I don't think he even realizes that he views it that way, because he's also very hard on himself. But they're his people, so he kind of looks out for them because no one else is.
Interesting. So then, I guess, is the whole series, is that less about the actual supernatural circle, and more just about Marsh and his goings on? And
well, so every story, so you don't initially realize it, but the second story, it does take a very supernatural bent. Every story in the series is based on the supernatural. I'm sure there are other stories that can be told about him, but the only stories I'm telling are the ones that involve supernatural mysteries. And so it's kind of monster of the week style. It's just this story is what weird thing has he gotten himself into this time. But overall, the series is titled The Redemption of Howard Marsh, because where the series starts, he's about as down as you can get. He lives in a storage shed that he owes rent on. And he doesn't have a car. He has no job or concept of getting a job, really no friends. Most of his family's disowned him. He's down. But over the series, the intention is to show him piecing his life back together, eventually trying to get clean, things of that nature.
It's like a redemption arc.
Yeah, very much a redemption arc. And the series just has to run long enough to get him there.
Yeah. So, I mean, the next obvious question is how did all of this come about? How did you think of Marsh and this Jubal County and why the supernatural?
Yeah. So I actually got started. I started writing at this point close to 10 years ago is when I started to take it seriously. And I've been heavily influenced by mostly horror authors, horror and fantasy. And so when I got started, I started writing short stories and just sending them out to get them published. And I got a few in some anthologies, things like that. And went pretty well. And I have a very love-hate relationship with the South. The South is it's where I've never lived anywhere else. I mean, I've traveled widely, but I've never lived anywhere else. And it has horrendous flaws, rampant racism, just abject poverty. I mean, there are places in Alabama where it is literally the third world. That I think it was the UN came in to parts of West Alabama and were like, this is a third world country right here. I mean, it's awful. But there are a lot of things to celebrate about the South. There's a culture of hospitality. The food is amazing, as my portly self will attest. And
anytime I've been down there, I've been eating well.
Yeah. So there are pros and cons. And so I started kind of writing some kind of vaguely Southern Gothic short stories, just kind of trying to show some of the weirder bits of Alabama or Southern culture, and really just kind of explore my feelings on it all in the form of some short stories. And I made up Jubal County for those stories. I didn't want to set them where I'm actually from or anything like that. And, a lot of it was just taking weird anecdotes from my life or stories that I've heard, and just kind of taking them and twisting them and turning them into stories. And so I kind of had this setting ready to go. I didn't think of it that way, but as time passed, I started getting some ideas of more magical kind of stories to tell in this. And then, meeting this would, if anyone was a wizard, he'd be a wizard guy and things like that. And it all just kind of simmered and brewed in my head there for a while. And then I just started jotting down ideas like, here are some potential things he could get into. And since then, and initially, the first thing I tried was to write a novel, like a full, just one continuous story. And what I kind of realized is Howard Marsh does not rate a full continuous novel because the mysteries he gets involved in are not that big.
So this is a collection of short stories?
Well, no, it's two novellas. Each book in the series is two paired novellas.
Gotcha.
And so and I basically decided, I just kind of realized that his cases aren't the kind of cases that get turned into full novels. For the most part, it's I'll tell you just the kind of the quick byline of a future book is basically he realizes that he's been going around, and every so often he sees this purple car, and every time he sees it he thinks, man, that's weird, and then he immediately forgets it. And so then one time he sees this purple car and he remembers all the times he's seen this other car, but he also remembers, man, every time I see this car, I immediately forget it. And so he just starts to investigate this purple car, and it's not an earth-shattering mystery, you know. It's not like there's dire repercussions on the line. It's just
Yeah,
it's
but
a
that's a
small
cool
town.
concept.
Yeah, it's a
That's a
small
cool.
town mystery,
I like that.
and so to me, the novella format works better for him. You know, it's you get to handle this small town mystery with a small town guy, and then move on to the next one. And I'm hoping that it will allow, because I can jump time with these novellas. Like these two novellas, one's in the fall and one's in the spring, and so I'm able to kind of jump a few months to a year with every novella, and kind of use that to show, you know, to so that he is allowed to grow as a character without it um seeming like rushed and forced. You know, it's like, hey, he's had a few months, you know, and you
Like
know,
a real
just
person.
yeah. And so that's what I'm hoping what I'm hoping comes across. We'll see what the people the people think, but we'll get there.
I mean, well, the back of the book sounds good, and everything you're telling me sounds even better. So you said you've been writing for about 10 years. Do you mean like I don't know if you like when you were younger, did you have an affinity for writing, or was that not really something you did? And then just one day you were just how did you go from how did you become Tales by Bob?
Yeah, so I will say that I have my entire life I have written the the earliest I still have the first little book I ever wrote. It was like 3 pages long, and you can hardly read it because it's very, you know, 6-year-old handwriting kind of deal. And but it was all, most of what I wrote was stuff to get laughs. Like I like to write pun based stories. That's what I did in high school. Was I wrote a bunch of like 1 page puns, basically.
That's
It'd just be a
hilarious. Some people
yeah,
hate
like
puns. I love them. They're
I
so
love
funny.
puns. Yeah,
They're
no,
so
so
punny.
yeah. So I ended up in 2012 or so. Um so there's a thing called NaNoWriMo. I don't know if you're familiar, but
Not at all.
so it's NaNoWriMo, it's National Novel Writing Month. And
Oh.
the idea is that in the month of November, you write 50,000 words. And so at the end of this month, in theory, you have a novel. Um, Now, to be fair, 50,000 word novel is on the shorter end of the spectrum. Most of the books that, especially like if you read fantasies typically over 100,000 words per novel, up to like 120, and your door stoppers are, you know, 140, 150. But
Okay.
so I did it. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I had written a couple of short stories just kind of on a lark in the months leading up to this. And then when November rolled around, I was like, you know what? I want to write a kind of an interconnected series of short stories. And they were all steampunk. I love steampunk. And so I just asked my friends on Facebook, I said, how would you like to die in a story? And
That must have gotten some interesting responses.
it did. And so I'll never forget, like one guy said that he wanted to die from a cyborg prostitute. Well, he didn't know it was steampunk. I didn't say that, but I did. So I wrote a
The
kind of
guy can dream.
you know. So I wrote kind of a steampunk fantasy inversion of Jack the Ripper, and he was killed by a steampunk prostitute, you know, and just, you know, things like that. And so by the time I was done with that, I had put a lot of work into it. 50,000 words in a month is not easy.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like, you know, I should do something with these. And that's when I really started thinking, hey, uh, unfortunately, this was right after, like right as I was getting my master's degree in something totally unrelated, music industry.
Oh, nice.
Well,
Yeah, well, we can have a whole conversation about that.
yeah, no. Uh, and then my bachelor's is in anthropology, so I just like to collect degrees that don't make any money. So,
Psychology, not doing
yeah,
anything with psychology right now. So
yeah,
I'm right there with you.
yeah. So it was. I I kind of thought, I've always enjoyed writing. I should really try and make a go of this. And so at first I was not Tales by Bob. I was just I was actually writing under Robert, my actual first name. Um 'Cause I figured that'd be my pen name. And but I had a bunch of those steampunk short stories got published by a small press in some anthologies. I had a number of like horror stories published in some other anthologies. And I started really kind of looking at the industry and starting to do a lot of research and how to get traditionally published and things like that. And I came to realize, one, you cannot make a career writing short stories. There's no money in short stories. If you are a famous novelist already, people will pay you well for your
Right.
short stories, but otherwise, good luck. The biggest royalty check I ever got from writing short stories was $4.32. Yeah,
Right?
yeah. So I was surprised they even took the trouble to send me the check. But and so and I have since written several novels. And they are in varying stages of readiness to try and get published. One is a horror novel set in Montgomery, Alabama, that I've shopped around to some agents and just not gotten really anywhere with it. And then I started writing these Howard Marsh stories, and the problem with novellas is, much like short stories, honestly, it's easier to get a short story published than a novella. Magazines publish short stories; they don't really publish novellas.
Yeah.
And major publishers, other than like Tor.com, no one's really doing novellas that I'm aware of.
Yeah, they want that hardcover, right?
Well, I think the industry is starting to slightly change. I think we're heading in a direction where in the next decade, you're going to start seeing more and more. You won't see them in print necessarily, but you
Right.
will see, major publishers releasing ebook novellas, I think, much in the way that Tor.com is doing it.
Yeah.
But so in the short term, I have three. I was sitting there, and basically I have three books or six. I have six novellas written that no one's going to publish because they're novellas. And if I could find someone that would be interested in publishing novellas, my follow-up worry was my main character is a drug addict, and that is, it really dances a fine line, because a lot of people don't want to read about a drug addict. It's more conservative people don't want a hero that's a drug addict. And then the other side of that is, a lot of people don't want to read about drugs being glorified, which I like to think I have not done. I don't try and sugarcoat and imply that his drug use is great. It has definitely destroyed his life. But you have people, I've had people, as I've explained it to them, that they've been like, I don't know, a METHgician sounds like you're glorifying drug use. I don't want to read that. So
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because there is that is definitely something that I mean, even just myself reading, when I saw that, my eyes just skipped down to that, and I was like, "Ooh, meth? What? Well, let me get this reaction on camera." And I'm glad, and I'm sure others would be glad to hear you say that you're consciously trying not to glorify the drug use, because it's so easy to do, first of all, and it is such a fine line. I can think of in the days when I was having my issues, I used to love the A&E show Intervention, and after a while I was like, I can't watch this. The whole point of the story is, if you do a bunch of drugs, your family will bring you into a room and sit you down and tell you that they love you, and then everything will be fine. That's not the kind of programming I need. And so even though, you know, they're trying to show, you know, the reality of the reality of it and how dangerous it can be, anything that's on TV is inherently being glorified. And so I wouldn't say the same thing about something that's in a book, but I'm sure, you know, it's not easy to be, you know, I'm sure that's got to be something that's constantly at the forefront of your thinking as you're laying the story out.
Yeah, it very much is. And it's one of those. I've never had any issues with drugs. But I have had, you know, family members and a large number of friends that, you know, drugs have really wrecked their lives. And so writing this, it is definitely a delicate balance. Like the tone that I go for is there there are a lot of lighthearted, silly moments in these books, you know, just very situational, like look at the weird situation he's, oh, Marsh, you know.
And that's,
But at the same
I
time,
think,
it's he is a drug addict, and it legitimately has messed him up. He, you know, he's constantly going to jail, um, things of that nature, and it's
and those things are interesting to whether it's, you know, whether we're talking TV or anything. Those are, you know, those are interesting things to read or watch or learn about. And so, you know, making it even more difficult to do something that is for the purposes of entertainment, that is surrounded, you know, surrounding something that's not good, but wanting, you know, obviously to have a good story that's entertaining. I mean, is there some type of like code or something that you go by that, okay, I don't want to cross this, or I don't want to, I want to make sure I don't do this? How do you make those decisions?
uh the the kind of the thing I went with is the act uh most of the drug use happens off camera, so to speak. He'll make references to, you know, he just did some drugs, because that's part of it. Marsh was never trained. He never got the training. There's a long, as will be revealed over the series, there's a lot of reasons why he wasn't trained. He was supposed to have been trained and he didn't get that training. And over time, he he had some rather heinous things happen to him, and he turned to drugs to cope. And after he'd done that, he learned that he could use that kind of drug fueled energy to, he still doesn't know what he's doing, but he can at least, the little things he does know how to do, he can do them more powerfully by kind of burning off that drug fueled manic energy.
I
And
mean, yeah, I definitely can understand what you mean. I mean, there's, you know, I was never like, you know, some like line in a gutter or anything. But you know, I did have my issues, and there was times when, you know, I'd put myself in certain situations, or I'd have to, you know, wait for this and that, and it's like, if I would just put this energy towards something else, then, you know, I could maybe have a story like Marsh.
yeah, yeah. And so uh I'm very pot friendly. Like, I don't smoke myself, but to me it shouldn't be a drug. I mean, it's treat it like a cigarette or alcohol, for Christ's sake. So that you'll routinely see him, you know, smoking a joint on screen, so to speak. But anything else in that is typically, he kind of refers to he calls it his box of oblivion, and it's basically just his stash box. And
That's really interesting, because you know, like in my circle of friends at the time, you know, we would have certain, you know, it's on the one hand, you know, like, you know, let's just take cocaine, for example. You know, if you're sitting there and you're actually sitting down to do some cocaine, it's like, oh, hey, we're gonna get into some hard drugs, do some cocaine. But, you know, like, in general, just talking about it, you know, you have your little code words, and you know, it again, bringing it back to this idea of not wanting people to know, you know, nicknames and code words and all of this, and keep it on the low and all that kind of stuff. That plus the idea, you know, going back to what you're saying about how Marsh gets just into these hijinks, you know, being intoxicated naturally lends itself to those situations which are interesting.
Yeah.
So that's it'll be very interesting to see how much that plays a part without without getting in being about that, because that's mostly, if you read a story or watch a movie or whatever it is about something involving drugs, oftentimes the drugs are very heavily focused, and I mean, which is appropriate sometimes, but you don't always see I mean, on the other side, like, there's like the Wolf of Wall Street type stories where it's not that at all. But not everyone who uses drugs is straight out of Requiem for a Dream or anything. It's more subtle than that.
Yeah, no. So I know kind of early on, he in the first tale, he's got some money, and he's got this crime to solve, but he's got some money, so he goes to his dealer first. Like, that's his first stop, but it doesn't show that. Like, he makes reference to, hey, I'm going there, and I think the line was, but you don't need to see that, no one likes a snitch. And so so then it picks up, the next day he spent the night at his drug dealer's debauching, and now it's okay, I'm fueled up, ready to go, let's go solve some crimes, kind of deal. So, but like I said, so he does use drugs, but I try and keep it
that's just part of his character, right?
Yeah,
it's not the story.
Yeah, so
Cool.
it's his crutch, it's his cross to bear, and but it does help him very situationally, while overall destroying him.
For better or worse, it does help.
Yeah,
right?
and so
Gotcha.
I'm hopeful that I've captured that. But again, it's one of those. It's such a tricky line, and me not coming from having this kind of struggle, I hope that I have kind of nailed my intention, but this could be something that people read and it just doesn't resonate, and that's the big fear, is that I have unintentionally crossed a line or something like that.
I mean, I could. So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, based on, what you're saying, it seems like on the one hand, because that's not the point of the story, there's not too much to get into that you would or wouldn't know, or that you would misrepresent. And yeah, because there's other things going on. It doesn't need to be that. You don't need to be the drugs expert as the author, because again, it's just part of Marsh's character, right?
Yeah.
I like that. And so I mean, while the METHgician thing caught my eye, I'm really seeing that there's not, it's not a story about drugs. It's not a Requiem for a Dream story. It's not this harrowing, dirty, raw, gritty type story in that way, at least. No. And there's a lot there's a lot more there. So I think especially, because I think it's in a different color too, right? The METHgician thing on the back. So
it is, yeah.
With someone reading that, and the way that I was like, oh, okay, well, we got something spicy here. What's going on? What would you want to tell that person before they read the book? That, okay, that is stuff that they do like, but hold on, it's not just it's not Requiem for a Dream, but it's finish that then.
Yeah. No, so that word METHgician doesn't actually come up in the text at all. He would never call himself that or anything like that. But I again, it's a pun, so got to steer into it. But the other thing is, like, I view it as that word right there is my target market for this book. I feel like they see that word and they're immediately intrigued. Like, okay, hey, that sounds cool. But I have had people that were like, I literally had someone, as I've been promoting this book, sharing it around and whatnot. I had someone, like, I was reading the back of the book. I was all on board. And then I got to that METHgician line and I'm out. I don't want anything to do with it now. But to be fair, if that line drove them away, they probably don't need to read this book. This book isn't really for them. So you got to have a dark sense of humor, and be ready to confront the reality of shitty South Alabama life, man. It's frequently not great down here. And so, yeah, I want people to know that there is humor, there is magic. But there is, at the end of the day, the hero of the tale is a struggling drug addict. It's not all sunshine and roses. Not every story is going to end totally happily. He might have solved the case, but in the process, damaged one of the few friendships he has left. And now, over time, yeah, it'll get better. But starting out, he doesn't start in a happy place. And so that's really what I want people to know is there is humor, but there is sadness, and it'll get better if you give it enough time.
I like that. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the actual publishing process, because I want to eventually publish a book. I'm thinking of, I was thinking of doing something nonfiction, and, I've got a lot of opinions about stuff, but they're kind of just all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I used to have another podcast which was just conversational, but much like the short story thing, nobody wants to listen to you talk about nothing for 2.5 hours if you're not Joe Rogan. So here we are. And so, fiction and nonfiction, I'm sure are have their differences, but let's say the idea strikes and, I'm going to write about that. And then, I'm writing and what would my next step be? I don't even know.
Okay. So I will say, I have mentored a few other, I've hosted writing groups, and I've done panels at cons about how to get publishing and that. So it's a topic I do really enjoy.
Notes.
Yeah, no. So honestly, the first thing, you just got to write the book. That's the hardest part. You've got to actually get the words on paper. And what I'll give a couple quick tips on getting that done. One is getting a creative space and mindset to where every time you sit down to write, play the same music, maybe light a candle of the same scent. And so, like, for me, there's a doom jazz band that I like called Born Ender Club of Gore. There's German.
I got to check that out.
Oh yeah, no, it's
outside of this. What is it?
Yeah, Bohren, Bohren, and Der, Der, Club of Gore. They're a German doom jazz band, and Sunset Mission is the album to check out.
Cool. I will definitely.
It's on every streaming service, YouTube, Amazon Music, Spotify, you name it. So
I've got my creative space. I'm lighting my patchouli, patchouli incense. And I've got my my trance music going, and that's my creative space. And so I'm in.
Your body will train itself. If every time you sit down to write, you do the same things, eventually your body and mind learn, oh, I'm smelling this, I'm hearing this, and it will slip more easily into creative mode. And the other thing is, what I find that really helps me is just, I did a challenge this year that ran the first 6 months of the year, is write 500 words a day. So every day I wrote 500 words. And what I find is even if you don't set a specific word count goal, write every day, because it's easier to pick up and slip back into that writing mindset if you write every day, even if it's just 100 words. It really does help. So, all right, you've got draft one done. You've got it all on paper. You need to then, honestly, you need to set it down for about 6 months. If you're not on a timeline, I would sit it down for 6 months. I would write something else while you set it, because what you need to do is you need it to get slightly unfamiliar in your mind, so that then when you start reading it and whatnot, things will stand out to you. What I find if I
Gotcha.
try and edit something right after I've written it, I miss so much stuff because I know what I just wrote and my mind will autocorrect things
Yeah,
and I won't notice it.
I can think of times when I was editing the other podcast, and yeah, just I would just put it on like 2.5 times speed because I just did it. And it's like I know there's one part that we want to cut out or whatever. And yeah, going back, I don't listen to my own podcast that often, but when it's been brought up in conversation, I go back and I'm like, I didn't even really remember saying that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I never would have thought to take some time apart.
Yeah.
So
Put it in a drawer, leave it on
that's
your
some
Google
great advice.
Drive, 6 months. So once you've done that, if you can, you may not have the time. And it's not the end of the world, but at that point you need to start doing your next drafts. It's basically just reading it, fixing stuff that you find, rearranging stuff if you need to, cutting stuff. And that's just what you need to do there is just going to come with practice.
So let me ask you about that because in like, and I'm talking, going back middle school, high school writing classes, there was always such a big emphasis on the editing and reviewing stage. And now when I write things, I definitely like, I'll go on Facebook and it's basically just my live journal at this point. Anybody who would care is probably block me, but it's just, I get, I can talk pretty well, but writing is really how I can best express myself. And if I'll write something long, especially the more passionate about it I am, the more I feel like I have to go back and make sure. But usually a once over, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is I wrote this because this is what I was thinking, and that's now things that I care about what I'm saying. I'm not necessarily caring about like the grade on the correctness, but I do want to make sure I'm expressing myself the way I intend to. So and when I was in grade school, just writing little assignments, I was just like, yeah, I got this. Edit it, and I would maybe change one word here or there just to have done it. So having not really had much writing experience since then, maybe you can give me a refresher on why that piece of the writing process is so important.
Uh, I will say that it's probably a little different for nonfiction writing. But the main thing you're trying to do is really just make sure you're getting your point or your story across clearly. And part of that is it may make perfect sense to you. And just because you wrote it, right. It's your thoughts on paper, but it's getting it in a way that because not everyone's going to get it, but as many people as possible, that your target audience understands what you're trying to do, what point you're trying to get across. With fiction writing, it's there. I think there's more of a concern with the prose, like how does it sound?
Okay.
There's very much a concept of show don't tell in fiction. You don't say, Jim walked in the room. I mean, you very much can. It's very situational, but it'd be much better is like Jim staggered into the dimly lit room, his feet, scuffing the freshly cleaned floors or whatever. At that point, you're showing someone what's happening, and so they can help get a mental picture of what's actually going on instead of just Jim walked into the room. Well, okay, you've told me what happened.
Maybe,
but
and I mean, what that cuts, I think, right to what naturally pulls me to nonfiction. I mean, when I was, a real little kid, I used to love reading fiction all the time. And then I'm sure I'm not the only one, but then school came around and they started assigning these crappy books, and I didn't like them, and and when I say I used to love reading, I used to love reading. It used to be an activity that I would do. I'd be skateboarding, video games, and reading. It was and just after that, all the way through high school and college and all this stuff, and I'm just not getting back into it. There's other things that I've tried to read, and just getting through it. It's like, what is the point here? And so maybe that's just my brain is wired a little bit more functionally in that sense. And that, because I definitely would never ever be able to write a novel. Never. My brain just doesn't work like that. I mean, like, I've been in bands, I've written songs and albums and stuff like that, but a story like that, I don't think so.
Yeah,
so the fact that it's different.
Yeah, and that there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, my master's is in music industry, but to get the degree, I had to take a bunch of it's actually technically a master's of post-secondary education, and a large part of that was, learning about different, learning styles and things like that, and different kinds of intelligence and whatnot. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. Like I like both. I have no problem reading some nonfiction, but I do tend to read fantasy but it's also different people are trying to get different things. Like for me, most of my reading is escapism, just trying to get out of my own life for a little bit.
So maybe you can answer this for me, because I love that aspect of TV and movies. And it is what I loved about reading when I was a kid. But I mean, maybe it's just because of the level of I've been saying for at least the last 5 or so years that there is legitimate literary value in what is in, not everything obviously, but some of the things that are on TV and in the movies. The first thing that comes to mind would be Breaking Bad. I mean, if you don't think there's any literary value to that, then I can't really I don't know what to say to you.
Yeah.
And then, I also, because of the whole, like, not reading stuff, I was super late to the Game of Thrones thing. And I've made the decision that I will start reading the books if I find out that the ending is written. But if there's not, the next book's not even out yet, so I'm not starting that.
No.
Anyway.
I wouldn't hold my breath on that.
Exactly. But I mean, and so I never really watched Game of Thrones or anything. And then eventually, I think it was a roommate I had that was watching it. And I was like, wait, this is awesome. And then I went, and it was luckily or unluckily right before the last season, where I got to binge all the way through, and I got to watch the last season live. And then same thing happened with the MCU. I was like, comic book movie or superhero movies, meh. Like, okay, I get it. Big strong guy, the bad guy, he saves the day. What's a big deal? And then it was, right around it was somewhere near before like the Infinity War time that people were like, nah, dude, like it's next level. I'm like, I don't know, because I had seen Iron Man back in the day, but of course that was just Iron Man at the time. But again, going back and watching through all those, I love that. I love the world building. I love the stories. I love all of it. But when it comes to physically reading, my brain's just going, what's the point? What's the point? What am I looking here? Ah, that's the answer. And I don't know. Is there any insight?
No, I may have some slight insight. But first I will say I've not watched really any of the Marvel movies. I love comics, but I don't read superhero comics. I like, more indie or horror or, kind of the sci-fi, just kind of the more out there kind of comics like Saga or Black Monday Murders, things like that. But because to me, comic books don't, no one stays dead, Captain America dies. Yeah. They made a big deal, Captain America's dead. And then 3 years later, they brought him back. And so to me, it cheapens the story. And so I've never watched the MCU stuff, although I did watch the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I love those. So I should give it a try, but I just haven't made that plunge yet. But anyway, more to your issue. I definitely have a little bit of what you have going on. So the podcast that I co-host, it's me and my buddy Derek, and it's a book podcast and primarily fantasy books. And we both like reading fantasy novels, but we read them for two very different reasons. I am very plot focused, and he is very character focused. For him, the most important thing is seeing that character growth and yada, yada, yada. Me, I want to know, where is this story going? like let's get there. And now I'm blessed that I'm a very fast reader, so I can typically get, but there are books that I read that I get frustrated. Is like, can we get there? Can we get where we're going already? And so I think it's probably something like that. Is you're just more of a plot focused guy, that you want to know the story. You don't necessarily need all the details.
I don't know though, because the because I separate shows in that way, whether they're more plot driven or character driven, and that's the weird thing. It's usually the character driven stuff that pulls me in more. And while off the top of my head, I'm thinking the Netflix show Altered Carbon. I don't know if you saw that. But that was very plot driven, and I love that show. But it was kind of hard for me to keep up because there wasn't that much character building. And so I don't know. Maybe it's just a left brain, right brain thing. I have no idea. But like,
it may just be the format, like they're like
because that's something about the MCU that maybe could lead you to whether you want to dive in, because it is going in with anything good that you have to say about the MCU, you have to take it with a grain of salt that it is for a mainstream mass appeal audience. So you go into it knowing that. So, but that being said, the way the plot is so particularly drawn out, and the details are laid, and the reveals are earned, and all of that kind of stuff. Like plot stuff like that definitely obviously matters to me as well. But I have to really be sunken into the characters, but otherwise it's just stuff happening on screen.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm a weird guy, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, no, but that's the thing. It's what I have found is if you are a particular way about a thing, there's probably a few million other people that are that particular way in the same way that you are on how you ingest media. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just finding what works for you. Like I would encourage you. I haven't read it myself, but George R. Martin put out basically a history book, or something. Dragons,
yeah, I think it's Dance with Dragons,
or it was something like that. It's like it's basically just like it's not a novel. It's
but I'm pretty sure HBO's making a show on it. So.
True, yeah, but how it's written like a history book. It's written nonfiction style on a fictional property. So that might be something to check out. Because you're not going to ever get a last book of Game of Thrones. I can just unless
we might, but maybe not from George.
No, he's said that no one's allowed to finish a series. That's the real. I follow this pretty closely. This is something we watch on our podcast. He has mandated that if he doesn't finish the series, no one gets to finish it, which is a real shame because I don't know if you've seen The Expanse. Sci-fi show on Amazon. It's a well-known fantasy or sci-fi book series. That's what it was first. And
I remember hearing about it.
Okay, so James S.A. Corey is who writes it, but that's actually two guys. And one of those guys is basically George R. R. Martin's right-hand guy who is responsible for keeping track of all the little details. So there is a popular author that is his right-hand man who already organizes all the details for him, who could take the series over if he died. And George is like, no, if I'm out,
and I mean,
I'm out.
As much as, and again, this is why I won't start reading them, because what's the alternative? Either not getting an ending or getting a season 8 type ending. Yeah. And which one's worse? And I mean, I've gone back, I think I've rewatched twice since it aired, and the way I've come to terms with it is that I'm okay with the events that happened, but the execution was just awful. Like, obviously, there a lot of things could have been changed. But if you just say you were just doing a summary of the whole story and you were hitting these beats, the beats themselves aren't that bad. I mean, Bran could let's not get into that. But yeah, I mean,
No, I'd agree with that. It's all in the execution. That's something else I tell people. People worries like, well, my idea is kind of similar to someone else's idea. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. Whatever idea you think is wildly original, it ain't. Like Howard Marsh, it seems like, oh, it's a redneck druggy wizard kind of guy. Well, like since I've been writing this, I've kind of thought about it. It's like, I mean, Constantine is a druggy wizard. That's not original. There's a guy named John Harkness who writes the Bubba the Monster Hunter series, which is basically redneck dealing with the supernatural. Like, so if you were to just be like, oh, well, Bob wrote a redneck wizard book, it's got to be just like, Constantine meets Bubba the Monster Hunter. Well, maybe it is.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's very different, which I like to think it is. I go to Dragon Con every year, and I sat in on a panel or watched a panel with a famous author that he told this story where he sent in, I don't remember the exact example, but let's just say he sent in a story about a time traveling cat to this magazine. And then he got that month's issue of the magazine in, and someone had written a story about a time traveling cat. So he's like, well, you know what? They're never going to publish mine now. But they did, because yes, at face value, it's 2 stories about time traveling cats. But what matters is the execution. They were executed very different and very well. So they were like, they had no problem publishing both. So that's that. At the end of the day, you've got what stops 99% of people from getting a book out there is they don't write the damn book. Write the book. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. Write the book. Right. At the point that you write the book, you just beat out billions of people. All right.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm thinking, the comparison to music as well is there's no completely original, undiscovered music out there. I mean, of course, there's songs and tracks that haven't been made yet, but it's nothing completely original in a vacuum. And sometimes that's not only not a bad thing, but it's a good thing. Like, when if you like a specific genre, then it's good to know that a new band that's labeled this or, labeled whatever, but,
yeah,
leaving the label argument out of it, under the same genre, like, oh, I'll probably like this. And it's, doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it hits the things that you do like in a different way.
Yeah. That's life is short. I don't want to listen to every new band to find the ones I like. I want to go listen to the new bands in the genres I like,
Definitely.
So it helps.
Definitely. Yeah. All right, man. Well, this has been great. I'm very excited to read about Marsh. And thank you for my little list here on what to do whenever I do figure out what the hell I'm gonna write.
Yeah. Once you get your first draft done, hit me up and I'll walk you through all your next steps.
I definitely will do that.
Yeah.
So anything that you want to plug or
Sure.
socials?
Yeah.
Floor is yours.
Yeah. You can find out everything you need to know about me at talesbybob.com. Or, if you find Tales by Bob on the internet, it's me. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Tales by Bob. There I am. I also do a book podcast called Books, Beards, and Booze. Comes out currently every month. But we've got about 170 episodes out there for you to listen to. And my book, Bringing Home the Rain, what we've been talking about here, launches August 22nd and will be available in print and ebook through Amazon.
Awesome. All right, Bob. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, this was a great conversation, and I am definitely looking forward to meeting Marsh and seeing what's going on in Jubal County.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks so much. And I will definitely, when I get you that draft done, you will be hearing from me.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot, bud.
Yeah.
All right, so that was Bob with what the fuck was it called again? Shit, I forgot the name of the book. Bringing Home the Rain The Redemption of Howard Marsh 1. So it is a series, and I definitely want to check this out. You know, I wasn't just blowing smoke up his ass. This sounds very interesting, and the idea of him touching on this thing that I've been aware of in myself, where, you know, I can't sit and read a fiction book. I get bored. You know, I could sit and read nonfiction, and you know, when I'm getting information, I'm about it. All fine. But if it's just a story, I just don't care. Yet anybody who knows me knows how obsessed I am with movies and TVs, and any new show here, any new movie, I want to, you know, pick it apart and watch any kind of analysis video and all that kind of stuff. So maybe there is, maybe I just need to retrain myself to be open and to be a little bit more patient sometimes, because again, talking about how things can be character driven or more plot driven. It's not usually one or the other. It's usually just more of one than the other. But yeah, usually those plot driven stories require a little bit of patience, because you don't have this character you're rooting for, or whatever the case may be. So if nothing else, Bob, you've definitely encouraged me to try to read some more fiction. But that is Bob Mcgough from Bringing Home the Rain. Bob Mcgough, Bringing Home the Rain. So you can check that out. All the links will be where you can always find them. And as always, you can follow me on socials at IDRYB Lutch. That's IDRYLUTC. Nope. IDRYBLUTCH at IDRYBLutch. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next time.